Hello everyone, Tamar here, back with another video. And in this video I'll be reviewing Superman Earth 1 Volume 2. Now for those of you who have not seen my review of Volume 1, feel free to look it up and give me your thoughts on it. Okay, when I first heard of Volume 2, I was ecstatic because I really loved Volume 1, and I would often look up on the web to see, is there going to be a Volume 2? Because I wanted to see this continue and not just be a simple standalone graphic novel. Because I've read a few different titles of Superman, be it Birthright, the miniseries Secret Identity, which is one of my all-time favorites. I've got the individual volumes of that, and I could never find the paperback edition of Secret Origin. Secret Identity. Secret Origin was done by Geoff Johns, which I have those individual comics. And Volume 1 of Superman Earth 1 was another retelling. Here, the theme of Volume 2 is power. And I'm happy that the team that did Volume 1, they came back to do Volume 2. And based on an interview I read, when Straczynski first released Volume 1, he didn't really have any intention or idea to do a Volume 2. The thought of doing a Volume 2 wasn't even brought up until, I believe, 6 months after Volume 1's release. Or DC Comics was basically telling him, we don't want you to work on your monthly comic book titles. We want you to focus on doing a Volume 2. Now, when Volume 2 was to be released, in the interview, he mentions that he's already working on Volume 3. So that should give a pretty good idea that it shouldn't take too long to have Volume 3 released. If I had to speculate, I'd say either early next year or maybe sometime in 2015. I'll have to look up on the internet and see if there's any info on Volume 3. But going into Volume 2 here, the story starts off with Clark Kent talking with Perry White, and Clark is looking at his article that's been framed by Perry White, and it's standing with the numerous other articles. And Perry White asks Clark, do you know why I have this framed? Clark doesn't have a clue, and Perry tells him, I did it for two reasons. One, to praise the person who did the article, and to make the point that you can either be known for the article you did in the past, or you can push yourself to be a better reporter and make other great articles. So basically, he was mentoring Clark and telling him, prove yourself time and time again, or else you're just going to be forgotten for the article that you wrote beforehand. And from there, Lois and Jimmy are having a conversation. Lois is ticked off that Clark got the article on Superman, and she's telling Jimmy, it doesn't make any sense why Superman would grant him the interview. At that time, he wasn't even a reporter for any news or organization. Superman could have gone to New York Times or any other newspaper publisher and tell his story. Why tell Clark? And she mentions that his record is clean. He's never gotten a speeding ticket, a ticket for jaywalking, broke curfew, nothing. And she finds that suspicious. And Jimmy's like, well, just because he's never done anything wrong in the past means that he's hiding anything. And from there, Lois looks into his past a bit deeper. She calls up one of his old teachers from junior high school and has a conversation with her. And she describes Clark's time in junior high by saying that he went from making straight A's to just barely passing his classes, getting straight C's and everything. And that before he did that, he would get beat up by other people. And this is a further elaboration of the character of Clark. If you've read Volume 1, it tells Clark's time as a kid, where he would get beat up on the playground by other people. And when these fights happened, he didn't start them, and he didn't fight back. Though his teacher was rather surprised that when he would come to class, he wouldn't really look hurt much. And she decided to test him one day when he's in the classroom. She hands him this test, and he asked his teacher, "Is this going to be on my permanent record or public record?" Basically, he's concerned that it's going to be leaked, or people are going to find it. And she tells Clark, "No, it'll just be between you and me." And she tells Lois that this kind of a test would take someone hours to complete, but for Clark, it took him 15 minutes to finish it. And when Lois asked, "How did he do on the test?" she said that she pretty much spelled it out. He got every question correct. And when she handed it to Clark, he wasn't surprised by it. He just simply knew that he would get the answers correct, and just nodded from there. Nothing that really stood out that something was different. And her final memory of Clark was at the junior high graduation dance, and it describes Clark as a sad individual, where he's in the gymnasium, other people are dancing and talking, having a great time, and he's standing off to the side watching them, not interacting, with a sad look in his eyes. And his teacher described it as a veil between him and everyone else. He couldn't touch them, they couldn't touch him. And I like that description, that since it's been brought up in other continuities, whether it be the monthly comics when it came to describing Clark, or films, in television, it's made it clear that Clark knows he's an alien, that he has powers, and yet he feels different, that he doesn't feel like he can belong to other human beings, that he just can't interact. And I like that touch of loneliness for Clark. It gave us, or at least it gave me, a sense of sympathy toward the character that you could relate to, because there's obviously loners and cliques, and if you want to associate with a certain group, you can't, because you're pretty much typecast, whether you're a nerd, a jock, a goth, you name it. We all feel alienated growing up. No pun intended. And another part in Clark's past that really touched my heart when I read it was, this is after Clark has gotten to know one of his roommates a little bit better, where her name is Lisa, and she's not a rather clean-cut type of love interest. She's a rocker, she's got tattoos, and he tells Lisa this story from when he was growing up, that one day he came across this cat that was injured by coyotes, and the kitten's mother was killed, and he rescues the kitten and adopts the cat as his pet, and he nicknames the cat Fuzzball, and he describes their close connection. His cat Fuzzball would always be by his side. They would spend a lot of time together watching the moon late at night, and then one day his cat passes away on his bed, and he doesn't even realize it at first. He's writing it in his book, and Fuzzball goes up onto the bed and sits right next to him and just passes away right there, as if to tell Clark that he wanted his last moment with Clark to tell him that he loved him in some aspect, and it broke his heart. And he decided to bury his cat up on the moon so that they would still have that connection, if you will. Since they always shared the view of the moonlight at night, this way he would be able to see his cat, and symbolically his cat would be able to see him. I really love that telling of that story on death, and how Clark, from that experience learned the meaning of death. Since he's invulnerable, he never experiences any fear of coming close to death, since he's not human. And throughout the volume, he's had a few battles with the parasite, and this is a characterization that I found rather interesting, because the character's name is Raymond Maxwell Jensen, and I had no idea that this was the original parasite, because the parasite I'm familiar with is Rudy Jones. So I like the fact that they're not going with a character that everyone knows about, because when you think parasite, you think Rudy Jones. And in my opinion here, Rudy Jones is more sadistic than Lex Luthor. I mean, we all know that Lex Luthor is a dark and menacing character that has killed people, or at least in some incarnations of Lex Luthor he has. But here, the character of Raymond is pretty dark. His introduction is him in this giant house, or large home. I don't know if it's a mansion, but he's got this man tied to a couple of barrels of kerosene, and he describes the character of Willie as being an associate of his, that he made it clear to Willie that he can come along his outings on killing people, watch him do it to other people, but that the one rule in allowing that is that no evidence is to be recorded. And he was rather displeased that Willie had backup video files on him, that he secretly recorded. And he makes the example of Willie that, since you did this, you've got to die, because he can't afford to have this information leaked. If someone were to get their hands on it, they would be able to apprehend him and take him to jail. So, in this, description of the conversation, and Willie being tied to the kerosene so that were hooked up to bombs, Willie's pleading for his life, saying, "I'm sorry, I'll never do it again." and Raymond is not satisfied with an apology and kills him. And it's not just a simple explosion. When Raymond is leaving the building, the entire structure goes down. Everything is ablaze. So, you know, just picture that. I mean, he's not simply satisfied with killing Willie. He wants every trace of the building gone. And from there, he goes to the place of business that Willie was working at and wants to make sure that there's no more information. That he's there to erase every bit of evidence that he did any wrongdoing. And a security guard or a cop stumbles upon him. He tries to make a dash and escape, and when he takes a turn past a corner, he ends up being in a testing room and is trapped in there and turned into the parasite. And you know, when there's not action between Superman and Parasite, it delves into Raymond's past, in that he has a sister named Theresa, and the only person he's really close to is his sister. So this is a parallel telling of Clark Kent and Raymond Maxwell Jensen's childhood, where Trouble went looking for Clark. You know, Raymond went looking for trouble and had a bad upbringing, and you know, from there, when Superman battles Parasite, he gets his butt handed to him 2 times. In the third battle, Superman has this rather invisible barrier as a protection suit against Parasite, because the Fortress makes clear, if you go up against this creature again for a 3rd time, you will likely die. So, hence, you know, Superman decides to make a protection suit so that he can fight Parasite and not risk having his powers drained again. And after he defeats Parasite, Lois, you know, after going over the information and learning a little bit more about Clark, she decides, you know, I'm not going to go through with the story. I'm going to drop it. But, you know, there's consequences there. Meaning that the teacher calls up Clark and tells him, you know, I just want to let you know that I gave you a glowing recommendation in this background check, if you will. And Clark is rather stunned because when he learns that it's Lois. And the teacher has no clue that Lois Lane is a reporter. And he asks her what Lois asked, and she tells her. She tells Clark. And this is where it gets rather interesting, because in the panel that describes Clark, you know, using his X-ray vision, seeing that his file was pulled, and hangs up the phone. He gets up and goes and looks directly at Lois, but it's shown where Lois has her back to Clark, and Jimmy is looking to Clark, and Clark's expression seems rather betrayed or hurt. Like he's looking at Lois, and he knows what she did, and he's stunned by the realization. This could end up being something rather interesting for a subplot for Volume 3. I have no idea who's going to be the main villain in Volume 3, but there is a character that is introduced later on in Volume 2, which I'm not going to spoil for anyone, so if you want to know who it is, pick up a copy of Volume 2 and check it out. But as for the characterization of Superman, I really don't think that he's how should I say this, reach the full mantle of what Superman is, because there's a few points in the story that show his eyes to be, completely red, and this to me shows that he's not in check with his emotions, that he's going strictly on anger. And there's one part in the volume that I'm rather puzzled on, because this happens after he goes to stop a tsunami overseas, and he comes across a dictator there who tells him, if you do not leave now, that I will spread these insects, if you will, and the people who die will be on your hands. The blood will be on you. You'll be the reason why this happens. So he agrees and leaves the area. And a panel or two later, it shows Superman looking off in the distance, and he uses his heat vision to decimate and destroy the area, and I assume also the dictator. And I'm going, well, what are they trying to describe here? Is it showing Superman not in check with his powers? Is he dreaming? Because much later he has a meeting with the dictator, and this is basically to describe him saying, I have a perfect memory of what I've seen, heard, and he relays the same words that the dictator told him. And this leads to him being taken off from power. The people in the country throw him out, to be more direct. And if I had to rate this volume, I would give it a 9 out of 10. Because, like I said, there's certain parts in it that is unclear. I couldn't make heads or tails what they were trying to do between Clark and Lisa. I mean, because they're described as friends in the book, but at the same time they're trying to make them love interests. Lisa's attracted to Clark, and she's more sexually open, and Clark, being the virgin, it makes him uneasy. And it's a great book. I recommend anyone who's read Volume 1, to pick it up. It's definitely worth the money. I can't wait for Volume 3's release. I'd love to hear what anyone else who has read this volume, what are your thoughts? Please rate, comment, tell me what you think. And until next time, later, guys.